live webinar. Today we're going to be talking about TeamQ, our informal call center application. Before we get started, I want to draw your attention to the screen here. We have a couple of upcoming webinars that have been scheduled. We'll go ahead and include those registration links to those in the follow-up email that you receive later today. And along with that, we will include a link to download the slides as well as the recording link. And also one thing, just as a thanks for attending, we're going to be drawing 2 names to receive a couple of, actually one each, Plantronics headphones. So I want to thank our sponsor there. And if you are one of those lucky winners, you'll get an email separate from us as well to let you know, and we'll get those out to you. And lastly, we will have time for Q&A. So you're welcome to actually type your questions in at any time, and then when we get to the question period, we'll queue those up and have Neil enlighten us with all the info. So with that, Neil, I'll let you get us started.
Thank you, Ann. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending. This is a fun one of our webinars to do because TeamQ is really it's generated a lot of excitement and interest. Partially because it's new. Everybody likes something that's new. Secondly, once you understand what it is, it falls into just a really interesting place and solves some problems that not too many other products really address. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about what it does and how it fits, and want to make sure you understand, where it makes sense to use it. We struggle a little bit with the name for this. TeamQ doesn't tell you anything, and the tagline, informal call center, that's sort of accurate, but it's also something we worry about. So we're gonna make sure you understand just where this product sits. And fortunately, not only that product, but ourselves, and we've been around a long time in the communication software business, and that gives us a pretty good chance to understand how these solutions work and what's really needed out there. And from our earliest days up to now, our products basically are always designed by getting massive amounts of feedback from the customer. And who knows better what they need in terms of solutions to their communications problems. So this is definitely one of those, and it'll join all our other applications in that best of breed category. We do this a little bit different than some of our competitors. Our application is a single application, CXE or CX Enterprise, and everything else simply gets turned on as a license. So there aren't, you don't buy separate products and stitch them together like some of our competition does. All this is tightly integrated, meaning if you're coming in on the speech automated attendant, well, all the mobility features are automatically triggered as well. Or if you write a custom application, a business process application, that's actually accessed from within the core product. So having everything tied together makes our solutions much easier to use. It's easier to deploy, and that's good, but you'll get over a deployment issue. What's important is that they're easy to use going forward, and I think you'll definitely see that on the TeamQ as we move it forward. We really make an effort to make sure our products fit in everywhere. We're lucky in that we're not owned by another kind of software company or a telephony company, so we're not targeting just a narrow slice of the market. We really design our products to fit anywhere. So regardless of your current infrastructure, you're going to be able to take our product in and use it today, and know that going forward, when you have to face infrastructure changes, which is happening on a pretty regular basis these days with all the way everything's changing, you'll know that if you have to change out your infrastructure, you don't have to change our piece out. It'll work with your older PBX today, it'll work with your newer PBX as you move forward, it'll move if you decide to go to the cloud, our connections will let you do that. All that is basically there. And that's a very safe feeling to know that once you do the work to decide if this is a solution you want to add, you can keep it long term. So let's look at TeamQ. TeamQ we call an informal call center, and that's not, that doesn't really nail what it is completely, but that's as close as we can get. We'll start by saying this is not really designed to be a replacement product for an existing call center that's out there. That's not really what it is. It doesn't, while it does the same things, its areas of strength are a little bit different. So if you have a 200-seat call center in your solution today, this isn't going to be something you're going to want to look at for replacing that. This fits somewhere different. It's really for smaller work groups We say informal call center, informal work groups because it's really targeted for up to 25 agents, at one time logged in. And you'll see why these limitations are there when you see how this product actually works. You can have multiple queues and multiple agents in different queues, but it really is targeted for that smaller work group. And if you think about what a call distribution system does, what an ACD system does, it pushes out calls kind of on a next basis, and it has various algorithms for who gets the next call. And we can do that. We can do universal distribution like next idle, that kind of thing. But that's not really where the strength is. What we do really is offer something unique, which is a pull model of call distribution. What this means is we're going to have a screen in front of the agent. We're going to put some really useful information on that screen about that call, who's calling and why, and then the agent's going to be able to look at that screen and select their next call based on criteria. It might be their skill sets. You might have 5 or 6 people in a group all with slightly different skill sets, and they can pick the calls that they can handle. It might be territory coverage or account assignment. There's all sorts of things that constitute the reason for why you'd pick a call. But agents can not only pick their calls, but they can do other things besides take calls. So the visual management of an incoming call queue is the real unique feature that this gives you. And you'll see how that works as we go forward. Fortunately, like most of our solutions, this is an add-on, a software add-on to our platform. So if you already have our platform or are looking at our platform, to add TeamQ is very inexpensive. Compared to what you think of in terms of real call center agent licenses, that's not the realm we're in. We're much less expensive. And this works everywhere. We don't care what phone system you have. This will work with the oldest phone systems and the newest phone systems. And it doesn't require anything special on the phone systems. No expensive computer telephony integration links or anything else. So looking at this, suddenly you find you have a solution targeted at smaller groups that's very inexpensive, and you're going to be able to take some problems that you've never really been able to address and address them with TeamQ. Now, phone systems handle call distribution on their own, right? Hunt groups or response groups, if you're a Skype user, they have, terminal, round robin. If all you need to do is distribute calls, through a group of people, your phone system's going to do that. On the other end, what we've had for years is larger groups where you have what we call process workers, have contact center products like multimedia contact centers, ACDs, etc. And this group distinguishes itself as being, a group of people who all have the same basic skills, and they do the same job. Take a call, process it as quick as they can, maybe have some wrap-up time, take the next call. This is all about measuring that high volume of calls coming through. And all the people in those centers do is take calls. But there's other groups, and once again, these tend to be the smaller groups that don't quite fit in that profile, but can't quite just use a hunt group. And they sit in the middle, and that's really what TeamQ is for. These people tend to be what we call knowledge workers, and what that means is, yes, they're taking calls, but that's not all they're doing. They might take calls for a while and then have to go do some other process and then come back again and take some calls. It's a different kind of group. And we're going to look at who these groups are in the next couple of slides. And then we're going to focus on one, which is an IT help desk, because that's a really easy group. Everybody understands what that group does, and we can talk about kind of the functions of TeamQ in that area. So with TeamQ, we're looking for groups where they have multiple types of requests and multiple job responsibilities. And because we can target this for a small group, because it's very inexpensive and there's no expensive add-ons like CTI to do it, what you now get to do is perhaps handle some of the problems that you decided not to handle when you bought your real call center. There might have been small groups where you said, $1,500 a year for an agent, for those 10 agents in that small group. I just can't justify that. And they aren't really just taking calls over and over, so it's not really even quite the right app. So we have kind of bandaged those groups. They're using hunt groups. They're kind of calling over the cubicle, saying there's a call for you. There's a lot of that going on. The next thing when we look at TeamQ is, because of the way this is deployed, It's a screen application and a telephone application, and that means from a mobility point of view, we just basically don't care where the agents are. You're going to see we have a Windows screen. As long as they can launch that screen, so probably a VPN connection, and as long as they have a telephone number that we can send a call to, they can run TeamQ anywhere. So you can run it in the office, you go home for lunch, you can work the rest of the day at home, turn that thing on, and everything's going to work the same way. So it's an important thing as we look at the definition of these smaller queues to understand that they can be flexible. The looking at the calls in the queue is the part that's really different, and you'll see some examples of that coming up here in a second. And because there really isn't anything quite like this, this is the piece we really have to look at when we're trying to decide if this is a solution that fits in a specific group in your enterprise. So when we look at the fact that we have the visual informations for the call, so who is it, what do they want, and we'll see we can get a very wide range of information depending on what we're looking for by reading out of databases and things like that. Then an agent can then decide whether they want to take a call or push a call straight to voicemail or all of those type things. And the visual nature is what makes it really happy. Makes everybody kind of work a little more efficiently, and that visual nature also lets, like a supervisor, get just a quick glimpse at exactly what's going on in that queue. So let's start with the caller experience, because that is one of the things that's very different here. You know, anytime you have a call center, obviously you have calls coming in, and you're going to answer those calls, and you're going to play in some announcements. And we're going to start that way, but we've automatically done something, which is capture our first piece of information that we can use, and that's the caller ID number. And a lot of people talk about, you know, writing really expensive screen pop applications and you know, customer lookups and things like that. We're going to do that same thing, except for the expensive part is what we're not going to do. It's very easy, the way this is laid out, to take that information and turn it into usable information. And now we start getting into the unique part, which is because of the features that are on CX, the other kind of features we can pull from, we can interface with the caller. We can have a conversation with the caller where we can ask them questions. You can ask up to 2 questions that have a numeric answer, account number, social security number, although that's probably not going to be used much anymore, your account code, your zip code, anything along those lines. And then we can answer, ask up to 2 multiple choice questions. What is your operating system? Are you looking for support on Windows, or are you looking for support on Microsoft Office? Are you placing a new order, or are you checking the status of an existing order? So we now have these 4 questions that have all given us data, and this caller basically is going to answer those questions as part of a script. So hello, welcome to, welcome to the TeamQ queue. What is your account number? And you put the account number in. And then we can ask, so what is the operating system you're working on? And all of that becomes really vital information when we display it on the screen for the agents. So in this case, they called in, they put in their account number, then they put in 2 for Linux. They need support on Linux in the help desk, and that's really good to know. And now we have 3 pieces of information, or metadata. We have their account number, we have their ANI number, and we have that they want support on Linux. Now the support on Linux is good. It's ready to go. I can put that up on a screen and people know just what that means. But if I show the account number up there, that's really not going to mean anything to anybody. And the callback number may or may not be valid as a callback number as well. So there's other things we can do to take this data and make it more useful. And what we offer is something called data dips. Data dips are little inexpensive programs that we write, and they're on our price book, and they really are inexpensive. This isn't like a large programming task. This is just a script we can run that can dip into any database in the enterprise that has access. So any kind of database that has a web service, an API, a stored procedure call, any of those typical ways that these databases support these days, we can then do something like take that account number and go into that Salesforce database I'm just showing, because that's one we've done, and pull back up to 4 pieces of information. So in this case, I'm looking at the warranty status, their customer length, the type of support plan they have. So I've converted that account number into some really useful information in terms of who's calling and why. And now I have enough information to put that up on the screen. So Once the customers put their information in, I can now offer them some choices. Now this first one, your position in queue is 2, the estimated wait time is 4 minutes. That may or may not be something you want to use. In a pull model queue, it isn't necessarily a first in, first out kind of function. We're going to see why in just a second. So this is an optional piece you may play or you may not, depending on how your queue is designed. But what you will do is offer them a choice of how they'd like to be serviced. If they want to hold for a representative, they press 1 to leave a message, press 2, and then it goes into our messaging system, and you have all sorts of options with that. Or if they want to request a callback, they press 3. Now, if the caller presses 3, as an option, you can ask them if their ANI number is a valid callback number. You know, that's not always the case. So up front, if you're using callbacks, you can basically, when you answer the call, saying, we have your callback number as this. Is that correct? And if not, let them enter one. So now the callback would be basically just like one that's holding in the queue, except it's not tying up any system resources, and the caller gets to go about their business and wait for that callback. So they've decided to stay in queue, this caller, and so now we have our queue. This particular queue for IT support has 3 callers in it now. It already had 2 callers waiting to be answered, both looking for support on Windows, and it has this new call, which is looking for support on Linux. Now, in a traditional queue, of course, as soon as an agent became available, that caller number 1 would be pushed out to that agent, and we can set up our queue that way, but generally that's not really where the strength is. Instead, we look over at our agent pool here, and we've got a bunch of people logged in. A couple of them are Windows specialists. They really don't know Linux. And then the one guy is a Linux specialist. He might also know Windows, but he's the one that's really the Linux specialist. So he either finishes his call or whatever task he was on. He looks at the queue and he looks down there, and he sees the 2 oldest calls are Windows, and he certainly could probably take one of those. But that means that Linux person is going to wait, because what's going to happen is one of those Windows specialists who only knows Windows will be free, and there won't be a call for them to take. So probably what happens is the agent takes the Linux call, even though that's technically out of order for an incoming call queue. It's a more efficient way to handle it when the users, the agents, have disparate skill sets or territory coverages or whatever else you're using. So that really gives them the ability to control that queue much more effectively than just a rule that says send out that oldest call. So now this person logs in and they take their call. They're on the phone with this person, and when they're done, they're going to hang up, and typically what they would do is maybe they're just going to look over at the queue and see what's in the queue now, or maybe because of that call, and in an IT help desk this is often the case, they now have some tasks to perform. So they're going to hang up from that caller, they're going to get on the web, they're going to download a patch, maybe they're going to make a desk visit to do an upgrade, and then when they come back, they can look at that queue again. Now in this case there is a Linux call, so this person would probably take that Linux call since they're the Linux expert. If they looked and it was nothing but Windows calls, well, maybe they have something they need to get done today. They can keep that queue open on their desk all day long and basically only worry when there's calls that they're supposed to be handling. So that gives the availability of the agents to really control how calls are handled. In the right kind of queue, where we're solving the problem in the group that has a disparate skill set and they're knowledge workers, this is a unique solution. What this isn't necessarily going to be good for is if, a customer every now and then says, well, we have to renew our, we have a 20-person call center and it's $1,500 a year for licenses and we have to renew them, and I can do much better by going with this. That might work because you can set it up as a push model ACD, but keep in mind there's discipline differences here that we're looking at. And there's some things you would expect in a call center that we don't exactly have. So agents can't break in on conversations or monitor conversations. We currently don't have a recording function for the conversations that are happening. And the reason for that is when we connect a call to an agent, we're not actually connected to the call anymore. We're keeping track of in our client that call, but the whole concept of being able to record that audio would require us to keep a connection to that call. Now we're doing that in our next version of software as an option, so that is there. But there are things missing from a traditional call center product. So you need to be very careful that you have in-depth conversations if you look at replacing a traditional call center. So the functionality here, once you have those calls in queue, is really why people would buy this. So this is a screenshot of a queue, and basically you can see all the calls in it of different types. You can see we've done the data dips, so people put in their account number, and that's under the identification column in this case. Then we did a data dip into some database, and we brought back, for this group, we brought back their name and their department, so we know where they are, things like that. Since this is an internal help desk, we didn't really need much other. They answered the multiple choice question, and now we can see what kind of support they're looking for. You can see when the call came in, and these calls are stacked chronologically. So the newest calls at the top, the oldest calls at the top, newest calls at the bottom. You can see the total call duration, how long that caller has been on the system, and you can also see their status duration. So if you notice on that top one, they've been on the system for 28 minutes, but they've been connected for 26. So that means there was a 2-minute hold time in that case. You can see the agent name, who's handling that call, and call notes. Any agent can look at a call and enter call notes that show as part of the call record. So somebody might have looked at that Karen Turner call, which is still waiting, and said, oh, I talked to her this morning, she's calling back to find out about that software upgrade, and I could right-click that, little field pops up, I type the notes in, now everyone can see those notes. So a very handy communications tool in this kind of queue where people are making decisions about what calls to take. Now you notice there's 3 agents connected, but one of the agents is connected to 2 calls. That doesn't really make sense. Neil Butler is connected, and he's talking to Miller Parks, and he's been on that call for a while. But down below there's another call with his name on it, but that status is on hold. So what probably happened is Karen called in earlier, Neil talked to her and said, you know, like any good tech support agent, reset your system and call me back if that doesn't fix it. He went on and got on another call, Karen reset her system, didn't fix it because it never does. She called back in, and when Neil saw that call come in, he said, well, I really should take that call next. So he highlighted that call, and he went up to the toolbar in the top, and he hit the hold icon. And now that call is holding for him. Everyone else can see that that's the call he'll take next. Besides taking the calls and putting them on hold, you notice there's a button up there that would send them directly to voicemail, the message button, or you could redirect that call. If I see that, oh, look, they need a software upgrade, well, we don't really do that, I can go ahead and highlight that call, hit redirect, and a little window will pop up that will let me send that to another queue, to another person on the system, to wherever I want to send it. So the power of this application comes from the agent's ability to make intelligent call routing decisions based on this information that we're sending them. And this is fairly unique out there. Now, if somebody did request a callback, it would still be in the queue, but when I went to take the call, instead of the take call button from the previous screen, you see a make call button when I highlighted this call. And this window pops up, and it shows me the telephone number that we captured, or the one that they entered. If when we said this is your callback number, if that's not right, tell us what it is. It has that number in there. I can click the dial button. It'll make that call. If they answer that call, I hit the submit button, and now I've just started the call record. Now it's just like any other call in the system. If they don't answer, I can reschedule it and basically put in some notes about, you know, it rang for a long time or whatever I want to put in there. So the ability to have calls come in and either wait in the queue or use callback is an important thing to kind of think about when you configure it. If they're holding for a call, so if somebody comes in and says, no, I'll hold, we're now using that trunk that's coming in from the central office, a port on the PBX into CX, and a CX port. So we're holding those ports. So if we have a queue where we're going to end up with 5 or 10 people holding as an average, we have to keep that in mind when we configure the system. It's nothing special other than adding more ports, but it is important to balance that out. By offering callbacks, what you allow people to do is get handled in the same amount of time, but not tie up their time while they're waiting or tie up the system's resources while they're waiting. So the basic way this goes here is a call comes in and we route it to the queue. And you can have as many queues as you want, or up to 50. And basically the script runs. Now the script can be as simple as, thank you for calling tech support, please stand by, the next available agent will take your call. And now we can use a push model call. It can be nothing more than that. Or it can have the questions involved, it can have a confirmation of the callback number, all of those pieces are possible. So the whole architecture here is simply software on the CXE system, and then everything else is an existing piece, right? You already have a network, people already have laptops or desktop computers, they already have telephones. So this is really leveraging what you have already. Now what's different here, one of the major differences is, as an agent, when I take a call and we transfer that call, I told you that drops off of CX. So CX doesn't know when that call is over. So when you hang up your phone as an agent, you'll have to go up. There'll actually be a hang-up button showing on your screen when you're on a call, and you'll have to click hang up to terminate the call record. So this is one of those things that's a change in discipline for somebody that's in a traditional queue. So these are the discussions we'd want to have as we looked at explaining how this works. Because we do it that way, we don't require a CTI link, and it lowers the cost of this dramatically. The other thing we do a little different manner is screen pops. So when I program up my queue, I can program a client-driven screen pop. Now what that means is, I'm down here in this link, you see I've got a web service, and this is just a web service I built. I built a little demo app once upon a time to show people how it worked. And if I contact that web service and I pass in two variables, actually one variable in this one that's showing, which is the customer ID number, then I'm going to pop the screen of their application. In this case, the one we did for our first demo was Salesforce.com. Salesforce.com has a nice web service that lets you do a screen pop. So as an agent, when I took that call, I right-clicked on the call, a little window came up, I hit a button, and I got a screen pop. So here's another way to get a screen pop without, $60,000 worth of custom programming to make that work at a server level. So very easy for this application to have just so much more information as part of the process than anything else has out there. And the costs on this are so low that it's easy to do. It makes perfect sense to do data dips and screen pops when they don't cost you tens of thousands of dollars. The agents, of course, can look and see who's on calls, but it's also handy to know what else is going on. So there's also an agent status window. And when you look at this window, you'll see who's on the call, but you'll also see who isn't. So you can see that Lars is in idle status. So that's, if Lars and I have the same skill set, that's good to know if I'm getting ready to go to lunch. Katie shows busy, and her busy reason is desk visit. As the administrator of this queue, I get to create busy codes, and I can, whatever's relative to what the people do. So in an IT help desk, it makes sense to have something where if she's gone, I know now that she's not taking any calls. She doesn't show up in the call window, but she's not available to take calls because of this busy status. And I can have all the basic busy status codes that I want. And those are tracked as well in the reports and the agent logs. So obviously, almost no one wants a tool that handles calls without some kind of information coming out of it. And this is a very rich application in terms of reporting. We have some real-time logs for supervisors where they can take a look at a queue. They can take a look at basically what's going on right now, a kind of a snapshot, and then they can export that to a CSV file if they'd like. And then once it's in a CSV file, they can sort it and get various information out of it. Now this is not the reporting, this is the real-time logs, but it also has a full reporting package. So the reporting package basically has these reports. All these reports, by the way, are built. We're using a Microsoft SQL database on our server, and these reports are built using SQL Report Writer. So if anyone has any skills in that, they can modify our report or make their own reports. It's very easy to do. These reports are what you'd expect them to be, agent activity, queue activity, all of those types of things. And each report has a detailed listing like you see here, and at the end of the report, a summary listing. And these reports, it's very easy with these reports to export them and to manipulate them to get whatever information you're looking for. So the trick here is finding those solutions where knowing who's calling and why is important in that work group, because that's really what this product does. The way it hooks up is software running on the CXE platform using your existing network, your existing phone system, everything else, and that just makes it very easy and inexpensive to deploy. And once again, like I said at the very beginning, it's easy to use. Everything we do, we try and make it such that once you buy it, you'll get your money's worth. So often people buy UC solutions only to find out 9 months later, a year later, that their employees just aren't using them. This is the kind of solution where you know they will use it. So if I look at handling a call as an example to go through one. Call comes in. This is the help desk again. In this case, because I'm going to offer a callback, I'm verifying the number. The number you're calling from is such and such. If this is okay for your callback number, press 1. Otherwise, press 9. Then I ask for a numeric input, in this case, your employee number. Then I ask for a multiple choice input. What are you looking for help on? Then I tell them you're number 4 in the queue, 45 seconds. To hold, press 1. To leave a message, press 2. Request a callback, press 3. And now they're in the queue. And basically, that's the kind of the verbose version of the application where we're asking for a lot of information. And it can be much simpler than that. It's going to depend on what kind of information your agents want to see on that screen to help them make the decision in terms of which call to take. We have done a nice study that looks about comparing kind of the costs for these smaller call centers, informal call centers, and all I can say is if you have an interest and you talk to us, when you find out the cost for this, there really won't be any issue about cost. This is not about cost. It's about, do you have the type of informal knowledge worker group that can benefit from this? And I have to say, most customers, when we do a presentation, somewhere along the line, someone says, oh, Joanne in accounting has this thing going on where people are calling in about their bills. This would be perfect for that. It's almost always that kind of solution. So keep in mind, we're looking for those informal call centers. We're not looking to replace real large call centers. We don't have reader boards and recording and a couple of those kind of features that really put us out of that market. And because we're screen-based, it doesn't make sense to make it any larger. If you have 25 agents logged on and 20 of them are on calls and you have another 10 calls holding, you've got 30 lines on that screen. And if it gets much bigger than that, it just gets awkward. So we're pretty comfortable with the sizing of this, pretty comfortable with the targeting of this. It's just a matter of spending the time to figure out where in your organization this might have a benefit. And that takes us to questions.
All right. Thanks so much, Neil. Okay, if you would like to submit a question, find the question box. It's probably minimized. If you use the little orange arrow in the upper corner, you'll expand the pane, and you should be able to see the question area there. But there are some already in the queue. So, Neil, is there a limit to the number of queues one person can log into?
There isn't a functional limit, but keep in mind, for everything you log into, you're seeing those calls on the screen. So depending on the size of your queues, probably 2 or 3 queues would be about as much traffic as would make sense on a screen. But if you had a lot of, very low activity queues, you could do more than that.
Okay. Is a port in use for the entire call?
So currently, no. The way this works is we hold that call when they call in and they say we're holding for an agent. We hold it. When the agent says give me that call, we transfer it and we drop off. But I caveat that by saying in the next release, we're adding some extra capabilities like monitoring and recording, in which case a port on our system will be in use. But you'll be able to mix it back and forth however you want.
Okay. Next, do I understand correctly the agents can manually cheat their status?
Manually cheat their status, yes. If you mean they could hang up on a call and just leave them showing themselves on that call and 20 minutes later log off, yes, they could do that. Typically the kind of groups that are doing this are not so driven by productivity numbers that they're tempted to do that. But yeah, like I say, the disciplines are different for this than a traditional ACDQ.
Okay, next question. What type of resources are needed on the voicemail server?
So assuming you have our system going in, the only thing you're adding is some software, some licensing, and possibly more ports, depending on how many calls you might have holding at a time in all your queues together. So if you have 4 different queues that you deploy this in, and on an average you have 2 or 3 calls holding, 9 ports, you might want to add ports to the system. But there's nothing else beyond that.
Okay. Next, is AVST trying to replace existing contact center solutions with this?
No, that is not what it's targeted for at all. This is targeted for those groups that didn't get added to the call center purchase the time before because they didn't quite fit in to a traditional pull model, and they're knowledge workers where they're spending some time answering calls and some time non-answering calls. This is targeted for those groups.
Okay. There's a couple questions here about port licensing, so I'm going to try to combine these into one question. So can we assign a certain number of ports to be used by the TeamQ application, and then what happens if you run out of ports?
So there's a couple of ways to do that. You don't actually assign which ports are used for TeamQ, but you can say the maximum number of calls that can be connected at one time are this. If you have, let's say we have it set at 12, and you have 12 calls holding, that 13th caller comes in, then they're going to go to a different announcement, and basically you can do anything that our system can do at that point, which is most likely either take a message or allow them to do a callback. What we won't allow them to do is queue beyond that maximum number of ports.
Okay. I'm just doing a quick scroll. So there's a question about getting the slides, and yes, in the follow-up email, we will send the slides as well as the recording. And Neil mentioned the ROI study. I will include a link to that as well in case you're interested in reading more about that. And so it looks like we have wrapped up the questions here. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. And of course, thanks to Neil for walking us through the presentation. And I'll let Neil close up as well.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you all for attending. We know it's hard to take time out of your day to do these, and you probably get harassed by many people who want your time. We appreciate you coming here. Hopefully we gave you what you need. If not, you can always get in touch with us at info@avst.com. So any questions that come up if you get off this and you go, oh, I wish I'd asked them that, that's what you do. Just go to info@avst.com, send us your questions, and you'll find it's very, very responsive. Also, feedback is good. If you've come to a couple of these and you're not getting what you want and you'd like to let us know, other subjects you'd like us to cover or give us any feedback at all, we really appreciate it. So thank you, everybody.
Have a great day, everyone.
To learn more about AVST, please visit www.avst.com.